some of the people in ALEC will say that they are sponsored by the same corporations that sponsor the National Council of State Legislatures, that some of these corporations give to that group as well as to ALEC, and these are companies that represent people who are employed in the state. They're people who, these companies have jobs and employ people in these states. So what's wrong with listening to them?
There's nothing wrong with listening to them, but when they give scholarship money, they're giving freebies to everybody. You get a free vacation not only for yourself but your family. Then you pay your dues, but it's probably donated from the same corporations. Then you're sitting at a table with the corporations writing the legislation. I don't think individual citizens get to sit at a table writing model legislation like that. You know, look, this is like, their excuse on this is like saying, you know, it looks like a duck, it walks like a duck, but it moves instead of quacks. It just doesn't make any sense. And fine, if that's where they think, if they think NCSL, which is bipartisan, and they don't have both sides sitting side by side, then fine, end the loophole for NCSL too. Everybody should be responsible for, you know, being limited to $75 in meals. If that's, you know, look, they carved an exception in the early 90s, and I know this. At the time I was an aide for the assistant minority leader. Some of you might remember Alan Zaleski, and I worked with another young aide of Stan Aronoff by the name of Scott Borgamenke, and we worked through a lot of these ethics laws at the time. And there was a decision made on NCSL and council state governments that there had to be a way to do that and to have these major issues that you see in the atrium where some trade group will have sponsor dinner or something like that and invite every single legislature. This is getting around that. Somehow we've creeped to the point where we have this organization that allows corporations to find a way totally around it, influence legislation, provide money both to the scholarship fund, to your campaign account, and sit on the same panel. It is like a duck that looks like a duck, walks like a duck, but you're trying to claim it moves. It just doesn't make any sense.
Bill Seitz said that sometimes the model legislation is actually written by the member legislators and then shared throughout. That it's, you know, there have been cases where Ohio had a good bill and then put it into the hopper as a model for other participants. I mean, does it have legitimate functions in terms of sharing legislative work among these members in the way that NCSL does?
I don't believe so. This is an ideological, corporate-based institution that is clearly not aimed at including other ideologies or most Democrats. In the state of Ohio, there are no Democratic members. There was one member that attended. We have a letter from him that he provided from Representative Adams that says he was not a member. It's Representative Stinziano. He's claimed that he was never a member, that he just went to see what was going on at these institutions. I would hope that he would step forward and say this is wrong. He's seen it firsthand. The bottom line is corporations should not be sitting with legislators and have more influence than anybody else. And if we have limits on gifts and ethical limits on how you behave, in fact, by the way, these opinions say that the legislative aides are under the $75 limit, but their bosses are not. Then something's wrong with the ethics committee or the way we've written the law. And the law seemed to work in the 1990s. So it's time for the Joint Legislative Inspector General to do something about this issue, or legislators to shut it down. And if Representative Seitz and others want to keep trying to make excuses, then perhaps even the exception for the NCSL and CSG conferences need to go as well. Because they're taking the spirit of what NCSL and CSG are, and they're twisting it for their own purposes.
Brett or Brian?
Yes.
I might just add, if you don't mind, just one quick thing. I've heard the claim by Mr. Seitz before, and we've looked extensively at this throughout the ALEC bill mill. And what we've seen often in that instance is that corporation or corporate lobbyists like Victor Schwartz, who's one of the good friends of Mr. Seitz, will get someone like Mr. Seitz to introduce a bill in Ohio, so it is a corporate bill, and then it is taken back to the by corporations and lobbyists as a formal national ALEC bill. And so it's a bit of a most of these bills are driven by a corporate agenda, by the corporate lobbyists who are these legislators. And so even if a bill originates in a state house, it may have originated as a bill that by that particular corporate interest or industry. And we know, for example, that NCSL has very few model bills. The few bills that it does are about unfunded mandates for the state. They're bipartisan in their nature. They're adopted and approved by both Democrats and Republicans fully through the bipartisan legislative structure of NCSL. And they're very rare. They're not moving forward a massive agenda that you see through ALEC. ALEC is distinct. It's unique. And the way it allows for this corruption is quite different from what happens at NCSL conferences. NCSL's committees do not have corporations as members. They're not members. They don't vote on bills. They don't approve the bills, and the bills that come out of NCSL are very rare and they're very limited. It's a very different beast.